Welcome back to the Explainer, everyone. Today, we're diving headfirst into the hidden electrical world of chemical reactions. And we're going to do this by walking through a truly complete cinematic experiment presented by Dr. Chem, all about the measurement of electrode potential. It's a world totally driven by the flow of electrons, but, to actually understand it, we first have to solve this fundamental, almost philosophical, measurement dilemma that sits right at the heart of electrochemistry. So, how do you measure the voltage of a single electrode without a partner? Think about it like this. Imagine trying to measure the exact height of a mountain, but you have absolutely no idea where sea level is, right? You could measure it from the valley floor or maybe a nearby plateau, but without a universal baseline, your number doesn't really mean much to anyone else. Well, in electrochemistry, we face that exact same problem. You simply cannot measure a single electrode's potential in total isolation. You literally always need a partner to complete the circuit and give you a solid point of comparison. Okay, let's look at the roadmap for this explainer. We'll start with the measurement problem, then look at absolute versus relative potentials, the standard reference, the three electrode setup, the Nernst equation, and finally, real-world lab applications. Section 1, the measurement problem. So to properly characterize the behavior of any electrode, electrochemists basically had to invent their own universal baseline. They needed a standard sea level, so scientists everywhere could accurately compare their data. Which brings us to the official IUPAC definition of electrode potential. What this definition is really telling us is that every single voltage reading you see in a chemistry textbook or on a lab monitor isn't some absolute value of one item. Actually, it's the difference between the specific electrode you care about and a standard reference point. It's completely relative by its very nature. Moving on to Section 2, absolute versus relative potentials. This reliance on relative measurements actually creates a pretty fascinating divide in how physicists and chemists view this baseline. On one side, you have the really rigid theoretical definition favored in physics, often called the Tresati definition. In this camp, the absolute electrode potential is the energy difference between a point inside the metal, specifically its Fermi level, and an electron completely at rest in a vacuum, just hovering above the electrolyte surface. So it's mathematically pure, sure, but practically, incredibly difficult to measure. On the flip side, chemists use relative potentials, measuring against a standard chemical half cell that you can actually just build right on a laboratory benchtop. So the big question is, how do we connect these two totally different worlds? Well, through some incredibly careful measurement, often using data from ideally polarizable mercury electrodes, scientists figured out that the absolute potential of the standard hydrogen electrode, or SHE, is exactly 4.44 volts, give or take 0.02 at 25 degrees Celsius. That specific number, 4.44 volts, is a massive deal. It serves as the mathematical bridge connecting the absolute electron-volt world of the physicist straight to the practical relative world of the chemist. Section 3, this standard reference. Now that we have our bridge established, let's step out of the vacuum and strictly into the practical realm to look at the standard sea level of chemistry. This image brilliantly illustrates how a theoretical standard becomes a physical reality. Look at the left side of the setup. We have the standard hydrogen electrode. You can see the platinum wire and a platinum foil covered in porous platinum. Hydrogen gas is being pumped in at exactly 1 bar of pressure into a highly controlled acidic solution. This entire left side, that is defined as exactly 0 volts. Then a salt bridge completes the circuit, connecting it to the magnesium half cell on the right. Because the left side is our 0, any voltage read by that high-resistance voltmeter at the top is attributed entirely to the magnesium. I actually really love this quote from the electrochemistry experts at Zimmer Peacock. They describe this whole referencing system as basically peeling back the layers of a theoretical onion. Because, you see, a reported voltage is not a fixed identity of a chemical. If you run a cyclic voltammetry experiment and get a peak potential of 0.275 volts using a pseudo-reference electrode, that exact same peak might suddenly read as 0.334 volts if you just switch to a 1 molar silver chloride reference electrode. The actual electron transitions in your beaker, they haven't changed at all. You've just shifted to a different layer of the onion, a totally different baseline. To communicate these complicated setups efficiently, scientists use a really specific visual notation. If you read this notation from left to right, we see the platinum and hydrogen gas of our reference. Those single vertical lines, they represent phase boundaries, like gas meeting liquid or liquid meeting solid metal. And those double vertical lines smack in the middle represent the salt bridge we saw in the previous diagram, which is absolutely crucial for keeping the whole system electrically balanced. All right, Section 4, the 3 electrode setup. Now, while a hydrogen electrode is the ultimate standard, let's be real, pumping highly flammable hydrogen gas into an acid bath isn't exactly convenient for everyday use. So, how do scientists actually control and measure these potentials safely in a modern lab? They use a 3-electrode setup. First up, you have the working electrode. That's where your reaction of interest is actually happening. Second, the counter electrode, which completes the electrical circuit. And third, a nice, stable reference electrode. By separating the reference from the current-carrying counter electrode, we minimize something called the ohmic R drop. That's basically a loss of voltage caused by the natural resistance of the electrolyte solution. Minimizing that drop is what ensures our measurements remain incredibly accurate. And the brain running this entire operation is an instrument called a potentiostat. It precisely controls the voltage between the working and reference electrodes while simultaneously measuring the current flowing over to the counter electrode. Just for some quick context, the inverse of this is a galvanostat, which controls the current and measures the voltage. But today, modern systems usually just combine both capabilities, giving you some pretty incredible experimental flexibility. Moving to Section 5, the Nernst equation. Up until now, we've only talked about standard potentials. But chemistry is dynamic, right? Let's see what happens when we start messing with the actual concentrations of our solutions. The math that actually governs this dynamic chemistry is the Nernst equation. Take a look at equation 16 down at the bottom. It shows that the overall voltage of a cell isn't just static. It's directly tied to the ratio of the chemical activities. In this case, it's the ratio of iron 3+ to iron 2+ ions floating in the solution. As an oxidation-reduction reaction progresses, and those concentrations inevitably change, the voltage literally shifts dynamically right before your eyes. Now, the analytical technique that leverages all this math is called potentiometry. The absolute golden rule here is that measurements must be taken under conditions of zero current flow. By using a high-impedance device, like a really good voltmeter, we ensure absolutely no current passes between the compartments. Because no current is flowing to mess up the system, we can take the sheer magnitude of the measured potential and relate it directly back to the activity of our analyte. Finally, Section 6, real-world lab applications. Let's bring all this theory together, the Nernst equation, relative baselines, referencing, into that concrete, cinematic experiment presented by Dr. Chem to see exactly how this plays out on the benchtop. First things first, Dr. Chem consults the electrochemical series, which you can see in these two visual ladders here. These tables list standard reduction potentials relative to hydrogen. And because we know exactly where different elements sit on this relative voltage scale, we can predict exactly how a reaction is going to behave. For instance, if Dr. Chem wants to oxidize iron 2 using a super strong oxidizing agent like potassium permanganate, these tables confirm, yep, it will work, and they tell us the exact theoretical voltages we should expect to see. But to actually run this iron and permanganate titration, the lab setup has to be incredibly meticulous. Instead of that bubbling hydrogen standard from earlier, Dr. Chem's setup uses a saturated calomel reference electrode. It's just far more practical for benchtop use, and it has a known fixed potential of 0.242 volts against the hydrogen standard. They use an inert platinum indicator electrode to track the iron, and this is key, carefully bubble nitrogen gas through the solution. Why do that? Well, it suppresses oxygen reduction at the electrodes, which would artificially shift the cell potential and completely ruin the data. It's basically Dr. Chem's perfect symphony of theoretical understanding and practical lab control. So, this all brings us to a final thought for today's explainer. We've seen how tracking a chemical reaction relies entirely on choosing a layer of that theoretical onion, picking a reference point and just deciding to call it zero. If every single voltage we measure in electrochemistry is just a relative comparison to a chosen baseline, what other absolutes in science are really just matters of perspective? It definitely challenges us to always remember the foundations of our data. Keep questioning the baselines of the world around you. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I will catch you in the next one.